forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And greetings. Welcome to another week of Bigger Ten. I am Steve Dace, flanked by my co-host, who's never my partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. We are now in deep of the doldrums of winter. I don't know if you saw, Aaron, looks like highs of like 5 next week. So it is basketball season fully. Never fear, though. We are less than 50 days until Selection Sunday. So spring is just around the corner, I should say, if we can endure another quarter of winter.
Yeah, that's how, it's just baby steps this time of the year, get through January. You've got one short month in February of just the doldrums, and then it should slowly, but surely, it'll start getting warmer. We'll start having basketball, St. Patty's Day, Shamrock Shakes. Don't put the cart ahead of the horse, but those are how we have to deal with
Shamrock
things.
Shakes.
That's how we have to just segment. It's basketball season, Super Bowl, short month, NCAA tournament, Shamrock Shake seasons. Try saying that 5 times really fast. And then we'll have a day here and there where it's 50, 60 degrees.
Do I look like a guy that's had a Shamrock Shaker 50? No, don't answer that. All right, let's get to it then. All right, let's get to the big 5 topics this week on Bigger Ten. I have done this before when there's been parity or balance in the league and we get off to this, start where everybody's got a loss or two early. I just did this on the show a couple of weeks ago.
I do this on the show every week.
We're going to have 6 and 7 loss Big Ten champion, right? I do this every time. And then lo and behold, someone always steps forward. Someone always emerges. And if you know the history of our league, a lot of times that program has been Purdue. They have won more Big Ten basketball championships than anyone else. And they have clearly asserted themselves. Now we are already halfway through Big Ten basketball conference season. Keep that in mind. So at the halfway mark here, they have clearly asserted themselves. They're in first place by well over 2 games. They are on pace to maybe win the league by 3 games or more. They're the only Big Ten team currently ranked in the AP Top 25, Aaron. And in fact, they are ranked number 1. So the rest of the league still looks like the carnage we were talking about before. Just for giggles, there's a website that you can go on and plug in the results of what you think the remaining games will be, and it'll spit out for you with tiebreakers what the Big Ten tournament bracket would look like. And there was like a game and a half of difference, or 2 games, I should say, of difference in the standings between having a top 4 seed bye and playing Wednesday night in Chicago in the first round. That's what the rest of the league looked like. But Purdue, I think at this point, has clearly separated itself.
Barring injuries or some other unforeseen, and I don't want to speak that into existence, of course, so other unforeseen instance of, whatever. Yeah, it's kind of theirs to lose at this point. And I think what the most important thing, I've been harping on this all season, is that they've been probably the most consistent team overall in this conference. When you look at the average net rankings, too, between the Power 6 conferences in college basketball. Big Ten, I think it's 55, whereas the Big 12 is like 30, in the 30s or something like that. So this is not exactly a deep league this year, not necessarily a great league, and you've brought it up ad nauseum as well. There's no great league this season as well. So I would just say Purdue looks like right now, barring something unforeseen, they should be able to walk away with this in the regular season. But remember, just 2 or 3 years ago, I think the Big Ten led the average net rankings of all of the Power 6 schools, and then the Pac-12 came out of nowhere in the college basketball tournament to kind of surprise everybody.
We only had 1 school in the Elite 8. Was that the year we had 4 or 5 teams get top 16 seeds, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you just, again, carnage is to be expected, I think, this March. But, hats off to Purdue so far at the halfway point.
Now, this is something I bring up all the time, too, because I just have so much respect for Purdue's basketball program that this stat just still amazes me. They have not been to a Final Four since I was in the 1st grade. 1980 was the last time they were in a Final Four. So does this team have what it takes to get off the schneid? Well, remember this trend. I bring this up around this time of year. I start setting this up for Selection Sunday. Since 2002, every NCAA tournament winner but one was top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency at KenPom. So, pardon me, 7 weeks until Selection Sunday, Aaron. That is currently these 8 teams: Houston, Alabama, which I think might be the best team in the country, UCLA, Purdue, there they are, UConn, which is having a renaissance this year, Kansas, the defending national champion, Texas, which despite the crazy story and the loss of its head coach, is still up there among the nation's elite, and Virginia, which has bounced back after last year into the nation's elite, as they've often been under Tony Bennett. So those are the 8 programs right now that meet that threshold. Let me get this out of the way too, because every time I bring this stat up, some blue check mark will push back on me and say, well, you still improve your stats during the tournament, so I don't know how good that number trend actually works. You're improving your stats in the tournament against the best freaking teams in the country, right? It's not like you're going to jump 20 points in defensive efficiency during March Madness against the other great teams. You might move up 2 or 3, maybe 5 if you're on one hella run. But at that point, so many games, Aaron, have been played by so many teams. You're playing the best of the best in March Madness. You're not going from 75th in defense in KenPom to 25. You might go 35 to 25 maybe if you go on a run. And you know what? If that's you and you're that team that goes on that run, then you deserved it. You earned your trend line statistically the hardest way possible against the best teams in the country when the season turned to single elimination. So I get that pushback every single time, and frankly, I think it's a stupid argument.
I don't really understand it. Your sample size is like 40 games at that point.
Right.
How much are you really going to? How much upward mobility really is there at that
exactly.
point in any category, or downward mobility for that matter? Unless you score like 2 points a game, which I don't think is going to happen. So, yeah, I don't really quite understand that. Of these teams, I would say Houston, Alabama, Texas, and maybe Virginia are the teams that I have the most confidence they'll be able to keep up on this pace. Kansas, I've not been overly impressed by. UConn, as you said, they're a renaissance, so they have been playing very well. Virginia, perennially pretty good. I just don't have... UCLA, again, they've been very good as well. I'm just not sure about them. So that's more or less my gut feeling. Houston, Alabama, especially. They have been fairly impressive, although Houston has slipped up, although they just slipped up this last week. To Temple, was it?
Temple. Yeah, Temple beat them.
So, as far as it goes in the postseason, though, those are the teams that I have at this point the most confidence in.
When you keep that list up there, one of the things I like as well, teams that can play multiple styles, because you're going to run into contrast in the NCAA tournament. So can you win a game 59-58? Can you win a game 89-88? And when I look at, I don't think Houston can do that. I think Alabama can. I think UCLA can. I'm not sure if Kansas can. I'm not sure if Texas can. Virginia is playing the style of defense we're accustomed to, but their offensive efficiency has really gone through the roof, so maybe they can do it, and then it remains to be seen, can Purdue do that, right? Like, how effective is Zach Edey if you've got to get 80 in an NCAA tournament game to win, right? Because you're now getting up and down the floor. You're not, Purdue likes to run its stuff. It's been doing that since Gene Cady. You're not running your stuff, you're not and running a lot of sets for Zach Edey if that's the pace of the game. That's the one thing about Purdue I wonder about. If they had to score 80 plus to win in a regional with the makeup of this team, could they do that? I don't know the answer. And I don't know that this league will provide enough of a test for them before they get to March Madness to find out.
Agreed. And that's kind of the downside, I guess, because it's kind of the Gonzaga effect. If you're now...
they're the opposite.
The Big Ten, the Big Ten is not the the West Coast Conference or Western Athletic Conference. It's not that, but that's kind of the downside. If you're not tested all year long, it's just hard to have confidence in a team going into the tournament unless they are just loaded with future NBA picks. But even then, Gonzaga has shown us before that's never a lock. So that's why they play the games, as they say.
You mentioned the net rankings earlier. Let's get the updated net rankings heading in.
I've got the top 40 here, by the way.
You got the top 40, thank you. Heading into tonight, and we'll see, again, there's only one Big Ten team on the screen there.
in the top
And look
10.
how well represented the Big 12 is at the bottom there. 3 consecutive teams in the top 10 with Texas, Iowa State, and Kansas. We don't see another Big 10 team here until the bottom of page 2. Rutgers and Indiana are at 19 and 20. And you look at the rest of the top 40, Illinois, Ohio State. Ohio State, despite its struggles, that speaks to its overall strength of schedule. It'll be very fascinating if they're sitting there at like 30 in the net rankings and only a game or two over 500. Do they make the tournament? My guess would be yes. And then the rest of the top 40, Michigan State at 40, Iowa at 38. So you have 7 Big Ten teams in the top 40 right now. That's usually a pretty good number to that you should feel confident you are going to make the tournament if you're in that top 40. So I guess we're kind of saying if Selection Sunday were today, barring like a 10 seed winning the Big Ten tournament, which I think could probably happen actually this year, but barring something like that, you're probably looking at a 7 or 8 team league in terms of bids right now.
Yeah, and this just, I don't know. I guess when I was growing up, that was kind of the high watermark, but now it just seems like that's kind of another year that another year in the Big Ten. That's I don't know. I guess we've become spoiled here, but I don't quite understand. I wish I had that graphic. I should have pulled up that graphic. I don't quite understand the love for the Big Ten. It's just been so mediocre. But then I guess if you weigh that against the rest of the landscape of college basketball, just above mediocre is actually good this year when compared to the rest of the field. I think the team's most likely to fall out. And I'm only saying this, I'm only saying this just because of the respect for Tom Izzo. I don't think they should fall out. I think they should. Iowa, it's just such a crapshoot with them every single night. We'll talk about this in a little bit with them, with Michigan, kind of the same complaints I have with them. You know, Illinois, Ohio State, I don't have a great deal of confidence in, but they just ran Iowa off their court not that long ago. So those are, a couple of the teams that I'm not super confident in. Illinois, I think they should be able to hang in there as well. But there are a couple of teams. I'm surprised. Where is Northwestern? Are they not even in the top 40 now in the net? Because we didn't mention them. I think they must not be.
They're not there.
Weird.
Back to the trend line of the teams in the top 25 in offensive and defensive efficiency, one of the things, and I think this is going to point to just how watered down the overall product is this year, which, by the way, should make for a hella March Madness, right? I mean, there should be carnage night in and night out of that for those 3 weeks because of how watered down everything is.
Yep.
Okay. But just to kind of speak to that, one of the things I like to do is I like to see which 2 or 3 teams are close to that trend line that with a strong week or two could get into that. The next team, according to Ken Palm's analytics, the next team that has the closest shot of being top 25 in offense and defense is Creighton. They had a 7-game losing streak earlier this year. I think they have 9 or 10 losses. And they're on the cusp of being in the top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency.
They lost to lowly Nebraska, too.
Yeah,
that was one of the
home.
marquee losses.
So I think that kind of speaks to how watered down overall the sport is this year. But again, that should lead to one hell of a tournament with that amount of parity. Let's talk some football real quick on the way out of here. I saw look at this tweet about Ohio State's schedule in 2023 at Notre Dame, which is probably going to be, with the addition now of Sam Hartman, the outstanding quarterback at Wake Forest, that might be a preseason top 10 team. And Ohio State is on the road there. They take on Maryland, who has played them tough a lot of years. They're at Purdue. They're kind of rebuilding, though. They're actually really rebuilding as the Big Ten West champs. Penn State's going to be a top 5 or 6 team. Wisconsin, I think, may end up being the West favorite with the way they've loaded up in the transfer portal. They're on the road in Madison. Minnesota at home. Minnesota's going to lose a lot. And then at Michigan. But when you look at that schedule, and you look at no C.J. Stroud, lost the 3 best players off their offensive line, and a brand new quarterback in Kyle McCord, who is still highly recruited, but they clearly were trying to get C.J. Stroud to return. Here's an incredible stat, Aaron. And as you look at this schedule, consider this stat. Since the 2002 national title year, Ohio State has lost more than 2 regular season games in college football only twice. And one of them was with an interim coach in 2011. As you look at this schedule and considering what they lost, do you think this could be only the 3rd time in the last 20 plus years that Ohio State loses more than 2 regular season games. Can you find 3 losses up there?
Let's WNL this real quick. I mean, these Ohio State's one of those teams that reloads, but you had some incredible players. You don't just reload some outstanding, even for Ohio State standards, outstanding players without some growing pains along the way. WNLing this real quick. I see Notre Dame. I think that could be a loss. Mm-hmm. They surprised me this year.
Remember, they played well in Columbus this year.
They did.
Yeah.
And that's early on in the season. Michigan, that's a loss. Wisconsin, I agree they brought in an incredible roster really through the transfer portal. But let's give them the maximum benefit of the doubt. I'd say that's a loss. So that's 3, and that's not even counting Penn State, who should have a great year. So I would say between Penn State and Wisconsin, there's your 3rd loss right there. So yeah, I think that's the 3rd time.
Boy, howdy, man. If Ryan Day loses to Michigan 3 years in a row and it's a 3-loss season, yikes. All right, speaking of yikes, we didn't get into this because this story was just kind of breaking when we were recording last week. But here's the one thing with Jim Harbaugh, man. Take it from the Michigan fan here. It's always going to be weird. All right? Even when the team is great, like the last 2 years, it's still weird. Still weird. It's just weird flocks to Jimmy Harbaugh. It's just going to be weird. Have you even in your life heard the phrase computer access crimes? Had you ever heard that in your life? I have not.
No.
I didn't even know that such a line of crimes existed until now former Michigan co-offensive coordinator Matt Weiss was fired by the university late last week when police were called in early January and the complaint apparently had to deal with illicit access of university emails. Unmarked cars, according to the Detroit News, showed up at Matt Weiss's house. Now, of course, when you hear this, you often think of To Catch a Predator kind of really ugly stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's not at least that, okay? We've been told that it's not that. We haven't been told what it is. There's a lot of crazy rumors going on out there, okay? He hasn't been charged with anything as of the time that you and I are talking about this, but what would be the reason or purpose? What's the non-weird reason or purpose why you would wrongly access someone else's university email on the university server? What's the non-weird or what you doing reason? Because I honestly cannot come up with
the
one.
most benign reason would just you're super nosy and maybe a little insecure, so you want to see.
That might be benign. It's weird.
It's weird.
But it might be benign.
Yeah, might be benign. I mean, it's not benign either. It's the least benign. Doesn't mean it's not benign. When I heard computer access crimes, but it wasn't what you just said.
Yeah.
I just thought it was that. I thought it was just like somebody
I think we all
snooping.
thought that at
just
first.
somebody snooping around on other.
Yeah.
But then why would you send unmarked cars to the guy's residence? I don't. It's. Why?
Losing record without a win at home in 2020 is weird. National Coach of the Year, weird. Big Ten Coach of the Year, it's weird. It's just going to be weird, man. It's just going to be weird. That's just, Jimmy just tends to attract weird. It's just going to be weird. We'll come back, play our weekly game of Would You Rather here next. All right, let's get going here with some Would You Rather. Aaron, I begin with you. Would you rather have to rebuild the Minnesota basketball program or the Northwestern football program? Those were the two money programs and the money sports that have clearly shown this academic year they are below the Mendoza line in comparison with their peer group. Which one would you rather have to try to rebuild?
Am I coach, athletic director, supreme potentate of the athletic?
You can make that decision yourself too. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, as supreme potentate of the athletic department, I'm going with Northwestern. Okay, just for no other reason. Since you let me choose that, nobody expects Northwestern ever to contend for anything other than competitive to annoyingly competitive, really. And they have been. They've gone to, I think, more or as many Big Ten championship games as like Iowa has.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go to rebuilding the Northwestern football program. And here's what I would do. It used to be the dynamic was football is a way to increase awareness of our school, bring in more money,
front porch to the university,
etc.
Yeah.
Now that the TV deal is what it is, and then the temptation was we're going to water down our academic standards so we can get better players to come here, right? That's kind of the long and short. That's the temptation. That temptation's not there now with the new TV deal. Okay, Northwestern has absolutely no incentive whatsoever to, I don't know, let's say lower academic standards. I'm not saying that across the board the best athletes are terrible students. I'm not saying that. It's just that, in order to be able to rebuild, sometimes you have to take some of those guys with lower academic scores or tutors, whatever.
Yeah.
I would just say we're going to take all those guys. I don't care what the administration says. We're here to win. That's what we're going to do. We have now the money resources in order to do it. We're building a brand new football stadium that we're calling, we're building a soccer stadium. That's what they're building, but they're calling it football stadium.
Yeah.
We've got a brand new, looking out over Lake Michigan athletic. Why couldn't we build something here beyond just Northwestern?
Okay.
That's what I would do.
All right.
And just because, Minnesota, they're in a major top 20 market. There's no excuse, at least on the basketball side. Football is always more challenging because of the numbers of recruits and talent that you need. But basketball size, I don't really think there's any excuse why that program shouldn't be more consistently, at least above average than what they have been the last 10 or 15 years. This one is for you. Would you rather take a flyer on Illinois at 20-1 or Michigan State at 30-1 to come back and win the Big Ten this regular season?
While I think it's more than likely Illinois will be a factor, I'm getting a Hall of Fame coach and better odds. And I don't think it's definitively that Illinois has more of a chance to have a strong second half than Michigan State. So, I'd take the Hall of Fame coach with the better odds for sure. Yeah, I'd go Michigan State 30-1 just on the grounds of the track record of a Hall of Fame coach, and you're giving me better odds with a Hall of Fame coach too, right? It's a little bit like your team this weekend. You may not think Pat Mahomes is going to play much or be that effective given the high ankle sprain, okay? Especially on a cold turf, etc. But if they're an underdog at home and you're getting the best player in the world right now at home as an underdog, that's almost like an auto bet. Like you almost have to do it just because when do you ever get that kind of value, right? So you're giving me a Hall of Fame coach and better odds. To me, that's an auto bet if those are the two options. For you, would you rather be the first-year quarterback at Ohio State or Penn State this fall? So would you rather be Kyle McCord or Drew Aller, basically, is what I'm asking you.
I liked a lot of what I saw in the limited times that we saw him. I liked what we saw from Drew Aller. I'm going to go with Ohio State, though. I just think the track record, and I'm always going to, until proven otherwise, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to offensive, basically anything. So I would go with Kyle McCord, but I would be. I think from everything that's been said about this Aller kid, he has the chance to be as much of a factor or as good as any Penn State quarterback we've seen, at least since James Franklin has been there. Final one for you is not up on the screen because I forgot to actually do the graphic. Would you have, as long as your team came out on top, like Michigan, would you rather have a pandemonious regular season or a pandemonious NCAA tournament?
Definitely the NCAA tournament because it's my favorite sporting event.
Even if it meant Michigan necessarily didn't, was knocked out in the first round?
Yeah, because the whole thing's so random anyway. I think
might be anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we've made more national championship games than any program, and have only won one of them. Meaning we've made the most and won one or fewer. If you know what I'm trying to say. Yep. It's just such a random high variance event, and it comes at the perfect time too, right? like we talked about at the top of the show, you're coming for this part of the country, you're coming out of the desolation of winter. It's the first signs of spring and life. And then all that energy in the tournament and all that, excitement and tension and anxiety that just kind of, wakes you up from a winter slumber, man, And so I wouldn't want to change that at all. And I root for a team. When I was a kid, we won the Big Ten back-to-back. And we were clear, those were the Roy Tarpley teams. We were clearly the best team in the league 2 years in a row. We lost in the second round of the NCAA tournament 2 years in a row. And it was crushing. But didn't deter my love for the event at all. And I think it's just such a uniquely American event. The combination of meritocracy and luck and shared sacrifice, I love that element. I wouldn't want to do anything to take that away at all. I think that's what makes it such a special event. All right, that'll do it for our Would You Rathers. We'll come back, wrap things up with Twitter poll results and feedback of the week next. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you who wins the Big Ten basketball title, Purdue versus the field, and Aaron, 69% of people voted for Purdue, 31% went with the field. Do you agree or disagree with the results?
I think this is dead nuts.
I agree.
I think it's
even
dead
the
nuts.
margin, I think, is right.
Yep.
I'd give it about a 1/3 chance that someone comes out of nowhere and ekes this thing out. That's
looking at the Vegas odds as well. That's basically what they're saying. They have a 70% chance of winning the league this season, and I think the audience is right on the money.
Which brings us to our feedback of the week. This comes from the comment section here on YouTube. Buckeye fan here. What do you think the effect of the game is on both teams nationally? Do you subscribe to the belief that the focus and importance of that game, especially when both are undefeated, creates a mindset where it's like mission accomplished before you even get to the playoff? So this was a big thing when I was a kid, the 10-year war, Woody versus Bo. Actually, even I was like a baby. That's before I became a Michigan fan. And those games were titanic clashes. You can watch a lot of them, the original broadcasts on YouTube. And if you're bored this offseason for college football, you could do a lot worse than go back and listen to those old broadcasts with Brett Musburger and Keith Jackson and Chris Schenkel. And there was a thought, because of both those teams running at max capacity simultaneously, and the history and tension between Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler, that so much effort, Aaron, was put into that game that the Rose Bowl was anticlimactic. And both coaches, after they retired, admitted this, okay? The national championship in college football wasn't as treasured as it is right now. Not that you didn't want to win one, but there were so many polls, it was even more subjective than it is now, that there was just a lot more emphasis placed on winning regionally in that era. Everywhere around the country there was. And so you'd go out to the Rose Bowl and you kind of felt like this was the game, like you're playing a game after the Super Bowl. That so much went into that Michigan-Ohio State game. What we have largely seen since that era is teams go on runs, right? Michigan went on a run. Ohio State went on a run. Michigan just started another run. We haven't seen a lot since the 10-year war. We've had years. You had it the last couple years. You had it in 2006. But on a year, it's been since that era that on a year-to-year basis, both teams were at max lit in terms of their rankings, potential, etc. So I brought this question in because I do wonder, Ohio State played its asses off and probably should have beaten Georgia.
Last year, too, in the Rose Bowl.
Yep, and they played a great game in the Rose Bowl, too. Michigan had no excuse for losing to TCU. And then the previous year just ran into a historic buzzsaw in Georgia. But I think it's too early to say this right now, Aaron, but if we had another 3 or 4 years like this, with this much pressure and everything else on this game, could you get to a point where it would almost seem like mission accomplished if you won that game and then turned around and won the Big Ten championship? You see what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this a different era now that because we're going to go to a more expanded and pure playoff, that the national championship matters more than it did in the 70s? And so you just don't buy that that's the case.
I think it's I definitely think it's the former. I still think the juice around this game is so high. Even in the almost 2 decades when Michigan didn't win a meaningful game in this series, y'all still wanted to win it really bad each year, didn't you?
Right.
Okay, the players.
Right.
I mean, what was it? I think it was 2014, 2015. I think Ohio State was still in the middle of their big run against Michigan. You had guys getting kicked out of the game for flipping the double bird to the. Those players still care about it. So it's really difficult to just, especially with this age group of young men, to get up again after such a momentous game like that. I still think it's the case. So now, notwithstanding the last 3 or 4 years of the massive run that Ohio State went on before Michigan snapped it last year, or the year before last, it seemed like Ohio State just kind of took for granted beating Michigan, and why wouldn't you? I mean, they were kicking your ass every single game, and so I don't think it really had that much of an impact on them in the postseason. And but I definitely think that dynamic that's been true for decades, I think it still holds on. What's going to be really interesting, though, is when we go to the expanded non-divisional.
Right. Yeah.
And then we're going to get, at least a couple of times, I would have to believe, Ohio State, Michigan, the game, back-to-back weeks, essentially.
Yeah,
so,
and maybe 3 times.
And maybe 3 times,
maybe 3
with the
times in a
expanded
season, given
playoff.
the Big Ten. And you might see Michigan, Penn State 3 times in a year, Penn State, Ohio State 3 times in a year, Penn State, USC 3 times in a year. You could see, I mean, all those could be played that many times.
Do you think that will have the unintended impact? I know you got to go here in 2 minutes, but the unintended impact of actually watering down the game if you're playing 2 or 3 times?
I don't know. I want to say no because of the history and bitterness there, but I don't know. That's an entirely different dynamic. I guess I would look to like Purdue, Indiana basketball. If you are a fan of one of those two, do you feel like that rivalry is watered down at all by that possibility? I'm guessing your answer is no. Okay. But yeah, it's a new dynamic to consider for sure. We shall see in the very near future. All right. That'll do it for this week's episode. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, follow, whichever applies, however you watch, like right here on YouTube, or listen like on iTunes, Stitcher, and elsewhere. It would greatly help us to find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. And you can also follow us on Twitter in between episodes at Bigger 10 as well. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Dace. We'll see you next time right here on Bigger 10.